Hello, and welcome to the Mid-Am Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Tyler Munns, and on the other side of the screen for me is Nathan Furumasu. This
Hello.
is the fourth. Hello. This is the fourth episode of Mid-Am, and for this episode, we decided to do a little bit of a book club. And the book that we read together, or I guess separately, in conjunction, in tandem, but separately.
No. I read it to you over the phone at nights.
Every night.
Sip a cup of hot chocolate.
Yeah.
We did voices.
I had puppets. It was fun. But yeah, the book was Be a Player by Pia Nilsson and Lynn Marriott of Vision 54. If you are unfamiliar with their vibe, the general consensus or the general thesis of their entire philosophy is that every player, high-level player, has the capacity within themselves to birdie every hole, go out, shoot 54. That's the origin of this idea of Vision 54. They've worked with, tour pros,
Annika Sorenstam, Kevin Streelman, Russell Knox, Arya Jatarnagarn,
Suzanne Pedersen,
Ai Miyazato, a lot of big names, successful people.
And quite a few players that have gone on to shoot 59 out in tour events. So they are certainly onto something. And so if you have been in any way interested in the mental side of golf, you have more than likely heard of this book. If you haven't read it, I would suggest that you do. We're going to jump into some of kind of our favorite parts of it, but I'll just come out right in front. Spoiler alert. It is a good book. It has a lot of good, at the very least, I would say thought-provoking prompts for you to be introspective about your game and understand, or maybe not even understand, but ask questions that help you understand the kind of player that you are and where, how you are going to succeed out on the course. So I think we got
definitely
probably
there's
5 or 6.
Yeah, there's also a lot of good practical examples. Go try this, go try this next time you play, sort of thing, to explore some of these concepts for yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not a passive type of experience. It's something that you're going to get the most out of it if you try to implement some of the call to actions. So at the end of every chapter, which is something that I liked, is they basically give you a homework assignment of hey, go play a round of golf, and on these holes do this, on this hole do that, on this 9 do this, on this 9 do that, just to explore some of these concepts and try to understand what's going to work best for you. Because if there's one thing about the game of golf, is that it is incredibly subjective, and what works for some person doesn't work necessarily for another person, or they work in different ways. And so you can't really copy and paste as much as we might want to, or as much as, Golf Digest or insert Instagram, coach influencer here is going to tell you this is how you get super shallow. It's not necessarily you gotta get so scooped, dude,
bro.
with the Gucci slides. It's not necessarily going to translate from person to person to person. And so that's one of the major themes that, and I'm sure we'll get into it here in a little bit, but one of the major themes is that understand that golf is subjective, and you have to actively go out and seek the ways for you to perform your best while out on the course. If you want to play your best golf, and you cannot just think you're going to be able to adopt something someone else is doing with the same level of success that they are.
Yeah. I would say, I would like to also hold this book up as a part of what I would consider to be sort of a new crop of mental game books. Back in the day, we had a lot of Rotella and Zen Golf and things like that, where I read them. I mean, I've read 5 or 6 of Rotella's books, or I don't even know how many he has anymore. But I went through the library at one point and read every single like mental game book that I could get my hands on, and they're all pretty much the same. And it was like, believe in yourself and
Right.
visualization and think good thoughts. And they were all like you kind of said, like, this is not passive. Those all felt really passive. Um,
Hmm.
it felt like, the world of sports psychology um, is also kind of growing and meshing with what we know of in neurology and motor learning and things like that, and human performance, and it's sophisticating the the golf psychology or sports psychology, but it's becoming more sophisticated than just like think happy thoughts and everything will be great. Um, and not to disparage those books, they helped a lot of people break out of some really bad patterns and get more enjoyment out of the game. That's great, but when it comes to performance, it's not always it's not always helpful to just tell somebody to try and be positive. Um,
Well,
and
especially if
and I don't
that's
think that's what.
if you're stopping there, if you're
Yeah,
stopping at,
yeah,
hey, be
yeah,
positive. It's like, what does that even
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, what does that look like on the course? So what does that look like to me as a golfer who struggles with these stresses and who's at this point in my game and who has these problems specifically? So that's one thing I think I've seen it more of a trend, more books like this one, like Be a Player, in recent years, and I was kind of happy to read it because it was like, oh yes, it's yes, that stuff is important, but where do we go from there? And this book definitely provides that, and a lot of different good opportunities to try and figure that out for you individually as a player.
Yeah, so I mean, let's dive into it. I think you took some really good notes that broke it down even more, kind of um, like segmented
Yeah,
than even I did. So yeah, like take us through what was kind of like the first big takeaway for you, or the first kind of section that resonated.
yeah. I mean, I think they really front load the book. I think
Hmm.
where it's the first handful of chapters have their main like real big points, and the rest of the book is probably more a a deeper dissection of those things and how they look and how to figure it out for yourself on the course. Um, but the core concepts are definitely presented in the first half of the book. So I mean, just right from the get, my favorite thing, because this ties back into one of my goals for the year, is you have to be on the course to learn the game of golf, to get better at the game of
Hmm.
golf. You can practice your swing, whatever, but you have to play to get better at playing. Which, when you say it like that, it's like obvious
Duh.
and
Yeah.
makes you feel real dumb when. But one of my goals this year is to play like double the amount I played this in 2023. So that resonates with me. That feels right.
Yeah. No, I think it reminded me of this. I hear it a lot, but it's like if you were to walk up and down the range on like on a Wednesday at a PGA Tour event or whatever, a major, um, you could not tell who's the best player in the world just by watching those guys on the range. Like they're all world class players. Okay, so where do they separate? Well, they separate on the golf course, and how do they separate? Well, the margins are so razor thin at that level. It's like it's things like process, it's things like decision making, it's things like um, you know making these tiny improvements that over the course of 4 rounds adds up to one shot, which is enough to win. And so, like, the idea of like using time on the course to get better was something that to your point again was like, duh. That makes so much sense. But as especially for me, like last when I first read the book last year, um or two years ago or whatever, um like I was like, oh man, whenever I've gotten out to play, I'm like, oh, I'm playing for score. Well, it's like, well, no, not, maybe don't. Maybe when you go out to play, like, go to play to learn more about yourself and your game, and work on different processes, and work on your pre-shot routine, and work on making sure that your alignment is correct by hitting a couple shots, and maybe putting an alignment stick down, or do all these things that are not golf score related, but it's more like
Hmm.
doing it in an environment that is as close to playing golf as possible, because when you're on the range, you're not very close to like playing real golf, because you're in a lot of cases, especially right now, you're on a mat and it's a
Matt.
flat lie, and the lie is the same every time. And or even chipping and putting on in the practice area, it's just not it. If it's a putt that doesn't mean anything, because you can rake over another ball and do the same thing, and do that 50 times in a row, like eventually your brain just kind of shuts off. Going back to one of the things that Andrew von Lossow said last week in
Yeah.
an interview that we went through, like, this idea of this like only focusing on block practice and only doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like, at a certain point, your brain shuts off, and you're not taking in any more information. And that's all that's happening while you're out on the golf course. It's just variable after variable after variable. And if you are not practicing, like, vetting your internal processes in the environment where you're also having to like decipher and process all these different variables, like elevation, wind, temperature, lie, how comfortable you're feeling, what the pressure is, what the situation is, like, you're not really ever going to improve. Like, you're just, if your
Hmm.
ultimate goal is like being consistently better, shooting lower scores, or playing in, better in competitive in pressure situations.
Yeah, and that's another thing they mentioned in the book too. Is like you can't just go to the course and run around and play golf. I mean, you have to have some awareness when you're out there. You have to look at like you have to be able to objectively analyze, what you're doing, how your processes are working, what works well, what doesn't. You just can't. It's too easy to just get swept up into the ebb and flow of a round, and oh, I made a bogey. Oh yeah, now I made a birdie, and I'm now I'm got going the right direction, and just go through the motions. You need to have some awareness, and be observant. So I put down a couple of like on course ideas that I had while I was reading this, of things like, okay, how do I be observant? And I think on there are a lot of things in golf that don't, like, the game doesn't give a whole lot, but um, in this instance, trying to check your processes and be aware and stick to your routines and stuff like that. Golf does actually set up quite well for that, because it's sectioned off into 18 little pieces, and so I thought, okay, I want to try and implement like a tee box check-in, like
Mm-hmm.
before I start each hole, evaluating how's my energy level. Do I need to eat, or eat a snack, or drink some water or something? Where am I
Mm-hmm.
emotionally? Like, I just four jacked for par, like, which would be absurd, because that would mean he drove a par five and one. But anyway,
5-1.
yeah,
Good
exactly.
for you, man. That's
That's
that's huge.
I'm big. It's what it is. Or, but or yes, I just canned a 30 footer for eagle, and I'm all kinds of jacked up. Like, okay, maybe I need, before I hit the shot, I need to, like, let's bring it back down a little bit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how am I doing? Am I sticking to my plan? Am I going through my processes? And then the thing I've been doing, I'm building in as part of my process, is I'm good with like 30 foot, 1,000 foot flyover type goals. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, on this hole, what's the most important thing for me right now? And if the answer to that is like, well, like I really got to make a par here, or I really, okay, well then how do I make a par? What's the most important thing that's going to set me off right now? Is like, well, I got to put it in play, and for me to put it in play, what's the most important thing? I stick to my process, go through my routines, and execute. Right? That's gonna all those things. They don't guarantee it, but they give me the best opportunity to achieve my overall goals. So just having like a little T box check in is is a process idea that I'm going to try and implement.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it sounds like too that right there. I mean, you just went through this kind of you narrated what I would imagine is kind of these conversations that are happening inside your head. But you went from you're saying, oh, I have these 30,000 foot goals, but you in the span of a few seconds went from this idea of like I've got to make par here down to like I need to on this pre-shot routine stick to my process. Like you went
Hmm.
from like thinking 3 shots ahead to thinking about like this moment in time,
Yeah.
which I think is super important. This idea of like playing one shot at a time and not looking at the whole, especially not looking at the round as like, oh, I need to go out and shoot 74. It's like, whoa, dude, that is that's too broad. Like your brain you can't truly comprehend like all the steps necessary and all the things that have to happen in like a 4.5 hour period for you to do that, like, and dialing that back even further, your brain probably can't even fully comprehend every single variable and step that has to happen for you to par a hole. What can you like comprehend in that moment without expending
Yeah.
a ton of mental energy? It's like pick my target, walk up to the ball, set my feet, take a deep
Yeah.
breath, look at my target, set, trigger, go. And that's what you
Yeah.
like. That's it. That's all you can control. And you do that, 72 to 78 times in a round. All of a sudden, you shot a good
I mean,
score.
I think you mean
That's
65 to 72 times in a round.
Yeah. Well, I included
Yeah.
the emergency nine. So
Oh, there you go. Fair enough. There. Yeah. So anyway, got to be on the course. Got to be playing golf to get good at golf. Surprise. Um, but I needed. I it was good to hear that because that's kind of been my idea for myself, and it's nice to have that validated. But I'm sure there are people that need to hear that. Like, get off the range. I mean, what was that thing on social media a while back? Tiger was like, just go beat balls, get off of YouTube, get off of like go play golf. That's how you get good.
yeah, and
Uh,
and you especially look at guys like that are a little more non-traditional swings, and it's just like you can't tell me that like Lee Trevino was out there just like beating balls, like working on positions. It's like no, he was going out playing, putting himself in. I mean, he talks about it a lot, but it's like he's going out
yeah,
putting himself in pressure situations and learning how to and like just going out and getting it done. And that's not to say that spending time on the range isn't valuable because it's important, especially if you're trying to like work on grooving in different motor patterns for different move changes and stuff. But like um all that kind of goes away once like the you put a ball on the ground and it means something. And so if you're not also in tandem, and that's another thing that like I struggled with quite a bit, where I was like just spending all this time on the range and then I couldn't really change, take it to the course. And it's like, well, because I'm not on the course enough for it to even, if you're
yeah,
spending 5 days a week at the range, but like 2 days a month at the course, or one day a month at the course, or once every 6 weeks at the course, like you have zero hope of actually improving.
yeah, yeah. So my next point that I liked was from one of the other chapters. Is kind of the word that I wrote down was variability. They talked about how, golfers always trying to get more consistent. You talk to somebody on the range, they're like, oh, I'm just trying to get more consistent, not slice so much, or not, I just want to I just want to hit it straight every time. And they said that that's kind of fruitless.
Mm,
Or, it's not really something to strive for in golf. Partly because there is no consistency in the shots that you have to hit. Like,
right.
the course is so variable. You're never hitting the same shot. We talked about this last time. You don't want to be hitting the same shot because that means you hit one OB. So scientifically, it's just impossible practically, that like you're gonna end up in the same conditions and be able to make the same consistent swing every time and have that be what you need in that moment. You know, and rarely we don't do anything consistently as humans as far as like human movement goes. Like the variability is one of self-organization is the term I was trying to think of a nicer way to say it that wasn't so like jargony, but your body has
Yeah.
this ability to self-organize, and that's essentially to say like, okay, if I had my hand over here and I wanted to touch my nose, I could do it. My body could go from here, boom, boom, boom. You know, it's not that I'm trying to go from the same place to touch my nose every time. It's that I have the ability to take it from anywhere straight to my nose. That's what you
Right.
want as far as like variability and skill. You don't want to be like, oh, I can do this one thing a bunch, you know.
Right. Because
Um,
golf is unique in that in sports, or yeah, golf is unique in that like every almost every single aspect of it is different every single time, right? Like every time you play, you can play. I play the same course pretty much every week, but every time I go out there, it's like a different experience. And like that's not the case on a basketball court. Every basketball court is essentially the same. Football field, for the most part, it's essentially the same, especially when you get into like dome football, soccer, tennis. It's all the same. You're playing on the same courts. There's very subtle variations between this and that and the other, but like golf, you could play the same course every single day your entire life and and you will never once hit the same exact shot. So
yeah,
like so this idea and of trying to create a quote unquote repeatable swing, or I just want to I want to like groove in more consistency, is and like there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but like being almost like a slave to that concept, thinking that like
mm,
you can't go out and play unless you can repeatedly hit these numbers or whatever. It's just
yeah,
it's never going to happen. So stop like bogging yourself down with that, and embrace the ability to go out and be like, I can hit 150 yards from this lie, and I can go hit 150 yards from this lie, and I can hit 150 yards if the wind's going this way, and I can hit 150 yards if the wind's going that way, and like make it an athletic experience rather than like you're a swing robot.
yeah. And that's I had a note here saying like, okay, so then back to comments we've made previously of like what's within your control. Well, the pre-shot routine is what's within your control. I mean that's about all
Yeah.
that's within your control. And so your pre-shot routine isn't like, oh, I put my hands here and my thumb just exactly this way every time so that I can make the most repeatable consistent swing ever. No. The pre-shot routine is for your mind. It's so that you can get your brain and your body kind of into the right frame or the right state so that you can perform athletically. It's like I've done these things, so now I know I don't have to think about them, and I can focus fully on the target and responding to that, rather than like, okay, now my stand. I just love it when you get the people who like they take their grip and they put their club down and then they like look down at their feet and they're like paddling their feet and trying, or like the people who like pick up their club and put it across their shoulders and they're like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm aim and now I can be perfectly consistent. No, dude,
No.
that's just not what it's for, you know? Like you go through the motions and you go through your process to get you into a state to perform from, not because that's like what's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, it's not
mean
because
you
you set
perform.
up perfectly. No,
Yeah,
it's not
right.
like mechanically you set up perfectly. It's that you you put yourself in the mindset to perform like an athlete. I was listening to, I think it was like Hal Sutton talking about when he beat Tiger in the PGA. Was
I
that
mean,
Hal
that's all
Sutton?
I'd talk about if it was.
Yeah, so he beat Tiger. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who it was.
Yeah.
Um, but he was talking about how like that day, like um and it might not have it was some older tour pro, like 90s, 90s early 2000s guy talking about like on a day when things were just firing, it was like he's like, my body just knew what to do. Like I
Hmm.
knew that if I, my body would just like, if it needed to go yards left, my body was just like automatically going to adjust to that. And I know, and that's all to say, like, he wasn't thinking about, oh, I need to turn 3 degrees left so that like this starts out 5 yards or whatever. It was just like, he saw the target. He put his mind in this in a state where he was like ready to execute the shot, and then like his subconscious, that left side brain, is what executed everything for him. He's not thinking about it consciously. He's like his body is reacting to the scenario, and I have to imagine it's because he was so deep in his process that like he just didn't need to think about those things, and so it didn't matter where you put him on the golf course, he was going to perform because like he was in the right mindset. And granted, that's, you're not always going to, you're probably very, very rarely going to be in that mindset, but you know, trying to manufacture more opportunities for your brain to kind of go into that like kind of like primal
Yeah,
auto mode or whatever, is,
yeah,
that's just going to like breed more positive results rather than focusing, like to your point, yeah, like, oh, are my shoulders lined up squarely, like, oh man, is my
yeah.
grip like, is it 1 or 2 centimeters down from where it should, it's like, no, that's not the vibe. It's like, be an athlete, because golf at the end of the day, it's an athletic, activity.
Yeah, hitting a golf ball is, there's a lot of speed and power in it. Um, yeah, I was that made me think of that old analogy that a lot of people talk about, where it's like, okay, how do you drive to work in the morning? Like you drove your car to work, and then you get there and you park and you think, how did I get here? Like, I didn't have to be very conscious about exactly my hand position on the steering wheel the whole time, and like when I hit my blinker, or what my feet were doing. I wasn't thinking about the machinations, or the mechanical pieces to it. Like, and I didn't have to focus on that. I just saw the road, and the for lack of for the analogy, a target, and I went that way, and I responded to it. And so that state that we're saying how Sutton got into, is it's not.
Or whoever, some other
Yeah, or
TFO could
whoever,
say.
some guy, some chump that beat some other guy one time. Um, it's not a special thing to only tour pros. Everyone
No.
is capable of it. It's just you know, do you have the habits and the processes developed so that you can allow for that to happen, rather than get in your own way on the golf course, which most of us do.
Well, and I like that car analogy too, because it's like, hey, you got from your house to your office. Like, okay, were you worried about if you were exactly centered in the lane the entire time? No, you weren't.
Yeah.
Were you like, are you like, was it a bad drive, or did your ultimate destination, was that impacted because like you had to stop, you had to slam on your brakes because like the person in front of you stopped shorter than you thought they were going to? Like, no, I mean, that was like a, whether it's a literal or like
Hmm.
metaphorical speed bump, like that's just something that happened, but like at the end of the day, like you adjusted to it and you kept going, and you didn't let that one thing like dictate whether or not that was like a successful car ride. So I think like that is an interesting analogy of this idea of just like, no, you just you had your target in front of you. You kind of got into this like kind of left brain autopilot and just said, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to get from point A to point B. I've done this quite a bit before. And I think that goes back again to this idea of like, you've got to be on the course, man. You've got to be understanding like how to get into these types of like mindful flow states while you're out on the course. That this is not something that you can learn on the driving range or the putting green or the
Right.
chipping green. Like
Right.
you can only experience that on the golf course.
Definitely. One caveat: I know we've kind of used the left brain, right brain distinction a few times, and they do a lot in the book, as in they,
Mm-hmm.
as in Pia and Lynn, the authors. Um, that's the my education makes me balk at that a little bit, because that's not how the brain actually works. We know that, but
Mhm. Yeah.
it's for it's a helpful distinction to make. So if you're hearing this and thinking, well, they've proven that the brain doesn't actually work, and the left brain and right brain and blah blah blah. Blah. Yeah,
You're
okay,
right.
we know,
It's
but
it's it's an
but
illustrative point to say like
it's yeah
there's a kind of an
yeah
autopilot thing, and then
yeah
there's like this very like you thinking through every single aspect of this task that you're doing.
yes
And like I'll tell you, like the driving analogy is also very interesting personally for me because I spent some time. I went over to Ireland with my wife in September, and we rented a car, and I had to drive a car.
mm.
Well, I've spent my entire life driving on one side of the road with the wheel on one side of the car, and then all of a sudden, I was in another country where everything was on the other side. And let me tell
And
you,
everyone kept driving
I
straight at me, and I don't know.
yeah, but I'll tell you, like this like um having to get to experience something like driving outside of the that just for lack of a better um, you know analogy or whatever, like this left brain, and I was very much in the right brain or the analytical, like you know while I was driving, like that was one of the most stressful things that I've ever dealt with, was trying to do something that I've always done, but trying to think through every step and like really focus on, am I centered in the lane, am I going to turn into the correct lane, am I, blah, like all these other things. And so, you know again, like that's just it goes back to this idea of like, if you are out on the course and you are trying to live in this like very mechanical, like I am, all right, am I in the right position, am I too far away from the ball, am I close enough to the ball, am it is my P1 through P3, are those all good? It's like, if you're doing
Yeah,
that,
the peas.
you're not going to have fun. I can tell you that. And you're
No.
not going to be successful. I can also guarantee that those two things are true. You will not have fun, and you will not be successful. And so this idea of like playing golf swing versus playing golf, like there are so many, like that theme or that kind of concept gets woven in and out of everything that Pia and Lynn say throughout this book, is that at the end of the day, it's
Mm,
about getting out there and playing golf and learning about yourself through the action of playing golf, not focusing on like technique and mechanics.
yeah. What they do say that you should focus on, as far as like what you need to be aware of physically, this kind of leads me to my next note that I made for myself, is the things that they like to focus on aren't the P's, or
Right.
whether or not you're getting shallow in transition, or whether or not you're appropriately supinating and extending your wrists and yada yada yada,
Mm-hmm.
or whether or not your hips go into external rotation. All these dumb things that are cool to look at and cool to know about and see in pros as we dissect their swings and stuff. But what they care about is like balance, tempo, and tension.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have good balance? If you have good balance while you're swinging, that solves a whole lot of issues. Um, do you have good tempo? If you have good tempo while you're swinging, that solves a whole lot of problems, physically speaking. Like
Mm-hmm.
and these are all on the physical side. Um, and then of course tension. Like if you're so tense and rigid and you've got the golf club in a stranglehold, like you're never going to be able to swing it, for one, like with a true swinging motion, and two, you're going to be slow as all get out. So, and probably hurt yourself. So, like, if you can focus on and control those things and practice those things, then on the physical side of things, like those three alone have the potential to make someone a good enough ball striker to be on this podcast.
Well, and I'll say, like, within the last year, I've noticed within like the teaching pro influencer sphere on social media, like this idea of sequencing, this idea of weight shift being kind of paramount to successful, fundamentally sound golf swings. has gotten a lot more traction, and it is becoming a lot more popular. Like we're seeing a little bit of this exodus from position oriented like teaching philosophy into the, hey, ground, like how are you using the ground, what does your sequencing look like, and that a lot of that goes into this idea of balance. Like if you're not using the ground correctly, you're not balanced. That's just, it's as simple as that. Sequencing, like if your tempo's not right, meaning that, different parts of the body are moving at the right time and in the right sequence, you're not really going to be able to hit the ball well. And then,
Yeah.
tension, again, that goes to speed, and speed, as we know, is king when it comes to like competitive golf. So like this stuff is kind of becoming, not that it wasn't ever mainstream, but it's certainly like it's inching its way into the discussion, even around the more technically oriented conversations of swinging the club more efficiently. And it's like, at the end of the day, it does kind of break down to those things. And if you aren't doing those things correctly, like, it doesn't matter how bowed your wrist is coming into impact. It's like if your lower
Hmm.
body's way out ahead of you, like you're not going to be in a good position. So you
Yeah.
know like focusing on those things is really not super mechanically like taxing, I think, or mentally taxing from a mechanical aspect. It's like, okay, do athletically, do what I have to do to be balanced athletically, like, like sequence my swing. That's probably the most technical, but it does come fairly, it is somewhat intuitive, especially if you do things like step drills and things like that. Like that
Yeah.
sequencing stuff is, your body kind of just understands it. And then tension is, again, that's easy. It's just like, hey, just relax a little bit, like
Yeah.
loosen
Yeah.
loosen the muscles in your face, loosen, let your shoulders relax a little bit. And
Hmm.
and you can be, you can, to your point, that fixes a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's timely for me as well. It's a lot of what I'm working on this off season. I mean, there's just like rope swings and things like that, where and the tour tempo app, things like that, where I'm
Yeah.
really just focusing on like, okay, using pressure shifts and using proper tempo and stuff to just kind of just sort me out and not really worry about filming, yeah, and drawing lines on my swing and all that stuff. It's like, okay, you know let's focus on these things instead. So I liked that point as well. Here's where we start to get into that right side left side distinction that they use in the book, but then they have even sort of gone away from it themselves, and developed their think box and play box, and they even have a third box that they mention in the book that might be my favorite one. But again, it's just the distinctions here now to talk about how to operate while you're on the course. So we started with like the play box, which is essentially like, colloquially, it's the right side brain. It's the subconscious competence. It's the process is driven by our senses and our unconscious responses to those inputs, which produce motion and movement, right? And that's then the golf swing. Um, and how do we achieve that when we want to? That's the key. Um, I had an interesting thought, or well, it was interesting to me. Uh, that they mentioned, typically we see like, oh, let's have this visual stimuli that you're responding to. So like in other sports, like in basketball, right? You're looking at the little loopies on the rim where the net's hooked, you're right, and you're
Yeah.
just looking at it and responding to it. I imagine a lot of other throwing type sports are similar to that. Other racket sports, you've got a ball. That's your kind of your visual cue. Things are very visually heavy versus something they mentioned in the book, and something that I thought was really interesting is trying to incorporate other senses,
Mm.
and like incorporating your what you can see, yes, but then like take in the smells, take in the feeling of the wind. If you're playing a course near the ocean, you could probably kind of taste the salty
The sea
spritz.
salt, yeah.
Yeah, and just trying to utilize all of that to develop a robust um, a robust state to exist in when you're trying to just perform and respond to the task at hand.
Yeah, it's a more holistic way of like experiencing the moment, rather than just like visual, which is, and golf is I will say, tennis is and baseball are similar, but like golf is a unique sport in that the ball doesn't move and you are perpendicular to the target line. And so like
Yeah.
visual is kind of it's kind of, if you're only relying on the visual, it's kind of a tough way to interact with the game, because like you're essentially facing the wrong direction,
Yeah.
from the setup. And so, and then like when you're looking, just like mechanically thinking about it, when you like look out towards the target, but you have to like kind of bend and turn your head, like you're never really experiencing, and if you've ever worked on any alignment stuff, that becomes very apparent when
Mm-hmm.
you're like, okay, I'm looking at the target, I'm lining up, and then you put a stick on the ground and you're just like, oh my God, aimed 40 yards right. And then you like actually line up correctly. And then you're like, okay, what does that feel like? Well, I'm like, I feel like I'm aimed 40 yards left now. Well, that's where visual betrays you.
Mm.
So it does make sense. Like it seems kind of like foo-foo, new age bullshit to be like, you really got to, you got to get into your taste, dude. You got to get in that olfactory
Yeah.
experience while you're on the
Oh
golf
yeah.
course. It's like, well, maybe it's not so like,
Yeah.
out there to think that anchoring yourself only in the visual is probably not the best way, because your eyes are going to lie to you quite a bit on the golf course.
Yeah. And they in the book they talk about different, some different pros who have utilized different things. I mean, everybody knows Tiger like putts to the picture and so like and so forth, but that he's not like looking at that. He's taking this picture from this perspective and maintaining it as he's then looking down at the ball. So he's kind of like uh a visual snapshot. I think it was Mo Norman who said like he could taste a good shot or something like that.
Which is
Which he
something,
would
if you know
he
anything
would
about more Noah Norman, that's,
he
yeah,
would yeah. But then other players, one of the one I think, gosh, I'm trying to remember who it was, maybe Ai Miyazato or somebody who is like she feels like very balanced down in her gut, or kind of like
yeah.
low in her center of gravity. And that's her like, oh yeah, this is what I need for a good swing kind of thing. So um yeah, I just thought that was something I had never thought of before as a just for my own game, and was kind of like, oh, how can I try and experiment with that? How can I kind of blend that in? I used to I do have one instance where I felt like I kind of experienced something like this, and then I thought it was really stupid, and I never told anyone about it, and I never did it again. But there, there was one round where I was playing really well. There was one round I can remember in college I was playing pretty well, and I swear, like I could hear the flag, or like hear just whatever, the wind going
Yeah,
through
the
the
flap
grass or
the flag,
something,
yeah.
just like, yeah, or just whatever, but I could hear it off to my side when I was set up over the ball, and I would hit at it, and man, I hit some great shots that day, and I was like, well, that was weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
um
maybe
but
not so
but
weird.
maybe I need to pursue that a bit.
Well, and that's like, I think like for me, the biggest takeaway of the book is, even if you don't necessarily subscribe to the specific, um, kind of like thinking points, if nothing else you can get from this book is like, there is no wrong answer, and like be encouraged to explore, and
Hmm.
think outside of like the box, like really consider all of these things that seem silly, that seem like they couldn't possibly be connected to being successful on a golf course and shooting lower scores, and just like go out there and try different things and maybe discover something that you haven't discovered before. And like, if nothing else, if you're not going to take any of their other things and say like, hey, I'm going to use this, like, go find your own things then, but just do it. Like, go out onto the golf course and go find what works for you, and
Yeah.
try different things, and don't be afraid to, key into like, hey, you know what? When I feel like I can hear, the wind whipping the flag on the pin, or like whatever, I feel more connected and I feel like I have a better opportunity to hit a shot. Okay, cool. Like, then try to start putting yourself more in that mindset, or like try to like take more of a conscious stock of those things happening all on the course. And is that going to work for you? Great. Is it going to work for someone else? Probably not. But
Mhm.
if it works for you, that's all that really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Pause 2 seconds. I got to talk to my daughter.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the play box. That's the right side of the brain, or just kind of more, I would say, just not unconscious, but just you're not consciously involving yourself in what's happening, right? You're just kind of letting it happen, sort of like what you talked about last episode, just like letting it come to you. um
Yeah.
then to go into the other side of things, they have their think box, which we've spoken about this before. Essentially, it's everything that you can control in the golf course. It's everything that happens before the play box, everything, where you're going through your process, where you're deciding on club, looking at the wind, whatever, yardage, choosing, you know, what type of shot you want to hit.
Well,
I don't
even
know. I'm searching for
yeah,
things
and
here, but
even like
yeah,
the
it's.
the visualization standpoint too. Like, and the one thing that I took away from the think box versus play box was like, you're not making any more decisions as you step into the play box, into that like execution aspects of the golf swing. Like, you've done all your thinking, you've made all your decisions. And so every once in a while I'll catch myself as I walk into the shot, I'll be like, actually, I think I probably should like start this a little farther left, and I think it's going to curve in. It's like, oh no, okay, let's abandon this process, let's step back, let's reevaluate, let's make these decisions. What do I really think is going to happen? Okay, then go in to it. And I think, like, again, it being really the only part that you can control, being deliberate about it, and being like very regimented in the way that you like go through that process, and don't step away from that process until you feel like you're truly ready, within reason. Like, we don't,
Mm,
you got to play fast,
yeah.
but like, don't rush yourself through that just because you think you need to, or you're like trying to maintain momentum, or whatever. It's just like, and if at any point like you start wavering, like, step back, kind of go through your checkpoints again, and then step into
Hmm.
it and execute, knowing that you've made all your decisions, and being willing to accept that those decisions that you made, for better or for worse, have already been made, and there's nothing you're going to do to change that at this point.
Yeah. One other side note I had on ThinkBox stuff was, as a someone with medical education, this is where about the point in the book where I started to kind of have qualms about some of their
Yeah.
uh, anatomical explanations for things, and they start to get into a little bit more of their like, um, I will say, the outer edges of what we can know right now with regards to human performance. I mean, things may bear out in time with more
Mhm.
sophisticated scientific study and all that. But some of the things like the neuro linguistic programming was one of the things they talked about, which was like, this is a little out there, it's a little hippy dippy, but essentially it's kind of like,
Fringe science. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit. Um, or like they talked about a distinction between like gut brain and heart brain, and I groaned at that because you don't have separate nervous systems within your body. Maybe functionally, we talk with the nervous system, we talk about functional distinctions all the time. So, that works, but don't, come on. They're not
Yeah.
separate. Stop it.
Well, yeah,
And
and
I,
I think
yeah,
like yeah, go ahead.
I am, like I said, it's not to like shoot down their idea. I think their idea is correct. It's just like, ah, all right. I think that could have been said better. But anyway, I did really like the piece about association and dissociation. So like
Mm,
your shots, um, how you respond to a shot, or what you
yeah.
think about something, is fascinating. And that like if you associate with it, you're adding an emotional component to it. Whereas if you dissociate from it, you're kind of like choosing to step back and be really like objective, very Vulcan, for you Trekkies out there.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I was going to say, I don't know that it's like, from what they explained, it's like, I don't know that that's something, it's really interesting. I don't know how much it is of like a conscious skill that can be learned, or if it's more something that someone develops over time. Like, I think, like, I wrote down like Dustin Johnson is a champ at this, right? Like,
Yeah, that dude's dissociated
somebody
as
he's
fuck.
everything. Right? Yeah, somebody asked him like, hey, what do you think about that putt that you missed to lose the US Open? He's like, I don't think about that. Why would I want to
Yeah.
think about it? Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Like, so, or like the classic story of that reporter telling Jack Nicklaus, like, "Oh, you missed this whatever 4 foot putt," and he's like, "I've never missed on a Sunday a putt inside 5 feet," and he's just like, "Well, I have video." No, I've never missed a putt.
Yeah.
It's just like, cool. I thought that stuff was kind of fascinating. I feel like usually you see that and you're like, that cocky bastard, but maybe it's more like some learned skill of theirs. I don't know, to
Yeah, no,
dissociate from. Yeah,
that was one of the first things that I tried to put into practice when I first read the book was this idea of like recognize and celebrate the good shots and have an objective reaction to bad shots.
yeah,
And I will tell you, it feels very weird, very foreign, and very forced when you start doing it. But as you try to continue to do it, it feels a little bit less um, contrived and a little bit more like, okay, it's actually way easier for me to hit a bad shot and just be like, okay, or
yeah,
then when you had to hit a good shot, it's like, hey, awesome, that was a great shot. I friggin' stuffed that, dude. Awesome, like
yeah.
that's great. All right, let's go capitalize. And so I will say, like, just anecdotally, and I don't have a ton of I don't have like a ton of data points to like support it, but it is, I think, a learned skill. I think it's something that like you have to um, you have to like kind of force yourself to get over the awkwardness or like because it is so counterintuitive or yeah, it goes against like your initial emotional reaction when you hit a bad shot of that disappointment and trying to like compartmentalize that disappointment and really not give it any air to breathe. And it really reminds me, that Jack Nicklaus story you just told me really reminds me of Michael Jordan and the like how he would tell himself lies about the other team to like hype himself up. Like that's like
Mm.
sociopathic behavior, but like that's the kind of thing like that champions do to like put themselves in the right mindset. And I don't know if that's there was like sports psychologists that were telling them to do those things, or if that's just something they kind of like stumbled upon themselves because they were, very
Mm.
prolific kind of once in a generation talents and their brain works that way. But like, lying to yourself, um, it works. Actually, what the first TED talk I ever listened to was like a behavioral scientist talking about how they had blind people run races, been blind their entire lives, had them run a race, and then they told them they won. It was the first thing that they did when they were told
Mm.
that they won the race. They lifted their hands in the air. They had
Yeah,
never been told to do that. They had never seen anyone else do that, but they still did it. What does
Yeah.
that tell you? It's like you feel big, you feel great, you
Yeah.
make yourself bigger. Okay, so what happens if I'm feeling very timid and I'm feeling very stressed? If I make myself bigger, cortisol levels go down. So you can
Mm,
fake it till you make it, and I think that's what like the guys like Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods kind of tapped into. They just did it on a little bit more of an extreme level, where they said like,
yeah.
no, I've never missed a putt inside 5 feet on a Sunday. Whether or not that's true, inconsequential to Jack Nicklaus. He doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
like, the Pistons said this, that, and the other about his mom, and now he's got to go out and whoop their ass. Well, was that true? No. Did it matter?
No.
No.
It's like that Friends episode. I don't hot take. I don't really love the show Friends, but I have
Because
watched
it's
it.
not good.
So,
It's not good.
well,
That's
thank
some I
you.
like. I agree with you.
Oh,
Oh my
this
gosh,
is
dude.
why we're
That's
best
my hot take too.
friends.
That's
Oh
not a
my
good show.
goodness. No, it's not great. Anyway, but there is that one funny episode where Phoebe's pissed at oh, who was it? Like Joey. I don't even remember it. But anyway, she's pissed at somebody the whole episode, and finally he's like, at the end, he's like, okay, we're gonna try this quick thing. He's like, asks her a few questions, which she just answers and answers and answers, and then he's finally like, why are you mad at me? And she's like, because you did this thing and then this, and it's like clearly what she had in a dream. So it's like she
Yeah.
just her reality was so
Right.
yeah, just lie to yourselves. No, but anyway, so this our discussion jumped squarely or right into the memory box, which was kind of the next chapter, next point that I wanted to talk about anyway. And we've pretty well covered it. I think just it's to summarize everything. It's basically the I never lose, I learn mentality.
Yeah.
Um, and that's cool. I liked it.
Yeah, and that's also another thing where it's like you have to go out and very consciously make these decisions to think this way. But as time goes on, it gets a little bit easier and it gets a little bit easier, and then it starts to become a tool where you see the benefits of thinking in this way, and then kind of that reward center of your brain lights up, and it's a little easier to kind of jump into that
Mm.
mindset. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you had anything else there to talk
That's
about with the
no,
book.
I mean those are kind of my high points. Like I said, just sort of their core concepts are what I really dug in with. They get into a whole other half of the book of just different things and how kind of to me how these things are expressed further on the course. So you're gonna have to read it to find out, and
Yeah,
then you
so
can yeah
I think overall our takeaway, or our review of the book, is that it is valuable.
for
There
sure.
there are a lot of there are a lot of good takeaways. Um, there are a lot of different directions that you can go. It's not going to give you a step by step roadmap of how to play better golf. It's going to give you a ton of different things that you can try to learn more about yourself. So again, this is not a passive type exercise in what you're reading. Like it's a very active it's a very active experience. So you have to be willing to go out and try different things to see what ultimately works for you, and it's going to be a lot of trial and error to figure out and optimize. But I think at the end of the day, it's very valuable. It's something that I will probably read once a year, just to kind of see if I can find one or two things that I didn't, because it's very dense too.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the other thing
Mm-hmm.
about it, is it's pretty dense. So there's just like a lot that they packed in, especially to Nathan's point, that those like first half of the book is just like bam, 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 bam. You're just
Yeah, there's a
onslaught of
lot.
information, and so like kind of picking out certain things and trying them, and tethering yourself to them to figure out what works, and giving it enough time to see if it's going to work for you or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's but at the end of the day, I think it's super valuable. So we would certainly recommend that you pick it up and read it. I will throw a link in the show notes if you'd like to order the book. But 10 out of I would say it's something certainly worth reading, especially if you have read some older mental game books. This is a little bit of a newer, fresher approach that gets more into kind of the science around performance. And it's not, in no way should it be considered, the one and only truth around it. There are some generalizations made to Nathan's point, but at the end of the day, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I noticed how you were going to say 10 out of 10 and then hard stepped
Yeah,
over
no,
that.
I swerved on that one.
But I would say it's
I would
high
say
up
10
there.
out of
I mean,
10 worth
worth
taking a
buying,
look at.
worth
Yeah,
reading
I
for
would.
sure. 10 out of 10,
Yeah,
buy it and read it. As far as like golf books go, it's still up there for me. And mental
solid.
books
It's
even on
good.
top of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's all
Sweet.
we got.
Well, hey, thanks so much for tagging along with us on this episode of the Mid-Am Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Mid-Am Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. If you have thought to yourself, damn, I really like listening to these guys talk, but I would love to watch them talk.
Mm.
Do we have
He
the
has a
do
voice
we have
for
the suffice for it?
radio or a face for radio.
Yeah. Yeah. So we also post these up on YouTube in case that's how you would prefer to interact with us. You can find me personally on Instagram and TikTok at Fade and Fairway, which side, like huge tangent. I've been thinking about trying to change my handle on Instagram. There's only one name that I'd ever want to change it to, and it's Tyler Golf. But this kid
That's
made that
already
account in 2011 and has never logged in. So he made this account
what?
called Tyler Golf in 2011, and he's never logged in. He doesn't have a single post, and I've messaged this kid like 50 times, being like, "Dude, just give it up. Give me. I want." That's anyway. That's just a tangent. The only reason I brought it up because I messaged him again today. I'm just talking to a
Yeah.
brick wall at this point.
Yeah.
But
Maybe you
anyway,
should. Maybe we should message. No, never mind. I was gonna say. I was gonna say you should get him reported, get his page shut down.
I tried that actually.
Yeah.
Like full disclosure, I tried to I reported him, and Instagram immediately was like, no, he's doing nothing wrong. I was like, all right, fair enough.
You're like, he's doing nothing. That's the point.
That's the problem. But yeah, so you can find me, Fade and Farrow. You can find Nathan on Instagram at Thistle Leather Goods for some really cool head covers and other leather goodies and such. So be sure to check that out. Until next week, we will chat again. But have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.